Hey everyone, it's Mallory here with All About Cats. So since we started reviewing cat food brands here on the All About Cats channel, there's one brand that I think you guys have requested more than any other, and that brand is Royal Canin. So given the number of requests we've received for a Royal Canin review, that's what we're doing today. We're going to be going in depth on everything that you need to know about Royal Canin cat food. So in order to understand what Royal Canin has to offer your cat today, I think we're going to have to travel back in time, so to speak. We're going to have to go back to the late 60s when Royal Canin was born in a small town in southern France. So a veterinary surgeon named Jean Catherine noticed that a lot of the local pets were suffering from skin and coat issues, and he wanted to develop a food that could help them with those problems. So he started working on this food, and apparently he landed on something that worked pretty well. Eventually he shuttered his practice and started focusing entirely on the food, and so Royal Canin was born. Eventually the company spread all across Europe, and by 2001 it was purchased by Mars. So you might know that Mars Pet Care is currently the world's largest pet food company. It's also important to mention that Royal Canin foods are among the most commonly veterinarian recommended cat foods. So it's very often that you will go into a vet's office and they will recommend a Royal Canin food, either just for general use or because your cat has a certain health issue and they think a Royal Canin veterinary diet may be able to help. In order to understand why so many veterinarians are recommending Royal Canin food, I reached out to a number of them and talked to them about it. I learned that there are kind of three main reasons why veterinarians are so often recommending these foods. I think the number one reason is familiarity. Veterinarians know Royal Canin foods. They've been around for a while. They have a pretty close relationship with the veterinary community. A lot of vets are exposed to Royal Canin food and they trust it for that reason. Part of the reason why Royal Canin is so available and so familiar is because it does have a really strong research department and it employs full-time veterinary nutritionists. So compared to some other brands that don't really have as much of a budget dedicated to this type of research, Royal Canin is able to create these expert formulated recipes, and by doing that they've established a lot of trust with veterinarians. And then I think the third reason why veterinarians will recommend Royal Canin is because it's among a very small number of companies that is offering these veterinary diets. So when somebody comes into your office and their cat has a specific health issue, particularly something like kidney disease, you really don't have that many options. So Royal Canin is one of those options, and it's just easy to recommend. Of course, not all veterinarians are going to be the same, and your veterinarian may not approve of Royal Canin or may have different reasons for recommending it. But this is the impression that I've gotten after talking to a number of veterinarians about this brand and others like it. So Royal Canin offers over 100 different recipes, and a lot of them are intended to focus on specific issues. So you'll see that in their veterinary diets, which target specific conditions like kidney disease, diabetes, urinary tract health, and so on. You'll also see that in some of their non-veterinary diets intended for specific conditions, as well as their controversial breed-specific foods. In addition to these foods formulated for specific health conditions and breeds, you'll also see foods that are intended and marketed for cats of different lifestyles and life stages, as well as kind of all-purpose foods that will be appropriate for all life stages. These foods are available in dry and wet varieties in a wide range of textures and consistencies, kibble shapes, and so on. But across the lineup, there is a common theme. So in addition to focusing on this idea of scientifically formulated foods, Royal Canin emphasizes nutrients over ingredients. So with that being said, Royal Canin doesn't really talk a lot about their ingredient sourcing practices. We don't know exactly where their ingredients are coming from. We do know that all Royal Canin foods are manufactured in company-owned facilities. So whether they're made in Brazil, Canada, the United States, South Africa, or China, all Royal Canin foods are made in Mars-owned facilities. We also know that Royal Canin owns several research facilities located around the world, and that they employ full-time veterinary nutritionists to assist in the formulation of their foods. So we've talked a little bit about the manufacturing of Royal Canin foods. I also want to talk a bit about their recall history. It appears that within the last 15 or so years, it's been recalled 3 times. So in 2006, Royal Canin was involved in a recall due to elevated levels of vitamin D3, and then the following year, they were involved in that sweeping melamine recall. So their foods were found to be contaminated with melamine. At this point, we've gone over Royal Canin's history. We've talked a bit about their sourcing and manufacturing practices and which types of food they offer, and we've talked a bit about their recall history. But in order to really understand what Royal Canin has to offer, we're going to have to look at some of their recipes. So the first recipe that I want to look at is from their Care line, which again is positioned somewhere between a true veterinary diet and a regular non-therapeutic diet. Now, unfortunately, I'm not really able to comment on whether or not this food is going to be able to address urinary issues. This is really a complicated topic, and I'm not a veterinarian nor a veterinary nutritionist. But what I can do is look at the claims that this food is making, look at the ingredient list, and reflect on my experience doing a lot of research on feline nutrition and reviewing cat food brands. So first off, what kind of claims is Royal Canin making about this food? So according to Royal Canin, this food is able to promote a healthy urinary mineral balance in 10 days. It's also supposed to encourage your cat to drink more water, which will help to flush out their system. Again, this is a dry food. There's a little bit of irony here. We'll talk more about that later. But for now, I want to flip the bag around and take a look at the ingredient list. This food's first 2 ingredients are corn and wheat gluten. It's interesting to see plant ingredients positioned at the very top of an ingredient list for a food made for an obligate carnivore. It overall looks like this is a plant-based food with an emphasis on both carbohydrates and protein from plants. Now, as for how well this food addresses urinary tract issues, the first thing I want to mention is that, of course, this is a dry food. And we know that dry food is linked to a significantly higher risk of developing urinary tract disease, and it also encourages the recurrence of urinary tract issues over time. It's pretty ironic that this food is formulated to encourage your cat to drink more water when the best way to give your cat more water is to put water in their food. The second thing to mention here is that this is a high carbohydrate plant-based food. Now, foods like this will typically be supplemented with acidifiers to promote a healthy urinary pH, but another way to promote a healthy pH is by feeding your cat a meat-based, species-appropriate diet. So again, this food is likely an upgrade from another really low-value, high-carbohydrate, starchy, dry food, but overall I wouldn't really recommend it as a good option for cats in general, and specifically not for cats who are suffering from urinary tract issues. At about 41 cents per ounce, this food is a little bit more expensive than your typical kibble, but still, I would say moderately priced. The next product that I want to take a look at is also from that Royal Canin Care line. So this particular recipe that I want to take a look at is called Digest Sensitive Chunks and Gravy. So it's a food that is intended to support sensitive digestion and reduce fecal odors. So according to Royal Canin, the way that this food helps to improve your cat's digestive health and reduces stool odor is by emphasizing highly digestible proteins. So again, let's take a look at the ingredient list. So after water, this food appears to be primarily made from chicken byproducts, pork byproducts, chicken meat, and then pork liver. Aside from these animal-derived ingredients, the food also contains some wheat flour. It contains some powdered cellulose, presumably as a source of fiber and as a digestive aid. And it also contains an array of other trace amounts of plant ingredients as well as synthetic additives that make the food nutritionally complete. Overall, this does look like a pretty meat-based food that emphasizes animal-derived protein that's going to be more digestible for your cat. That being said, this certainly isn't the only food on the market that emphasizes animal proteins, right? And you can find plenty of other comparably priced products that don't contain these animal byproducts, which introduce some questions about the food's digestibility. So I think that if you were looking for a highly digestible food, I'm not really seeing anything on this ingredient list that you couldn't get from another product that emphasizes clearly named muscle, meat, and organs. Even though the food has, a fair amount of protein primarily coming from animal sources, it's still a little bit higher in carbohydrates than I would consider to be ideal. At about 50 cents per ounce, this food is moderately priced. It's not the most expensive on the market, but it's also certainly not the cheapest wet food you can buy. Now finally, I want to look at one more recipe, and this time it's not going to be a food that focuses on any particular health condition. Instead, this is a food that's intended to appeal to any sort of adult cat. So it's their adult instinctive thin slices in gravy recipe. So this recipe contains pork byproducts, chicken byproducts, chicken liver, pork liver, and salmon as a few of its animal-based protein sources. So it really contains a diverse variety of protein sources. So it looks like these animal byproducts and organs and salmon are all mashed up together, combined with some wheat flour, wheat gluten, some gelatin, some other ingredients, and formed into the sort of loaf and then sliced up. Now the gravy seems to be made with a variety of thickeners, so the ingredient list includes modified cornstarch, carrageenan, and guar gum. While modified cornstarch and guar gum appear to be pretty safe, there is a small chance that carrageenan could increase inflammation or potentially be carcinogenic. So this is an ingredient that I would typically steer clear of. So according to the guaranteed analysis, this food is about 77% protein, 14% fat, and 9% carbohydrates on a dry matter basis. So this is the only of the three foods that I'm looking at today that makes it underneath that 10% mark in terms of carbohydrate content, which means that it's a pretty good choice for your obligate carnivore. Overall, this looks like a relatively good cat food. It's not necessarily the best food on the market, but it does seem to emphasize animal-derived ingredients, and it seems to have a pretty species-appropriate macronutrient distribution. It does contain some of those animal byproducts that some of you may want to avoid, but overall, it does seem to honor your cat's needs as a carnivore. Now, this food costs about 46 cents per ounce, which makes it relatively expensive compared to similar wet cat foods. So now that we've taken a look at 3 Royal Canin recipes, let's talk a little bit about price. As you can imagine, for a brand with over 100 different recipes and such a wide variety of products on offer, Royal Canin's price varies depending on which product you choose. But in general, their foods tend to cost a little bit more than other products with similar types of ingredients. For example, Royal Canin's therapeutic urinary SO diet, a dry food intended to help cats with urinary tract issues, costs about 60 cents per day, assuming that you're feeding a typical 10-pound cat who eats roughly 200 calories per day. And then the wet version of that same recipe would cost about $3.60 if you're feeding the same cat. Again, that's on the expensive side. It's looking kind of similar to brands like Waruva or Tiki Cat, which are offering potentially superior ingredient quality, but not targeting those specific health issues. Moving away from veterinary diets, their adult instinctive food, the one that we looked at earlier, will cost a little over $4 per day if you're feeding a typical 10-pound cat. So again, that's pretty expensive. You're getting up into the same price range as, say, Nom Nom, fresh cat food delivery. So pretty expensive. And it doesn't look like you're getting the same level of ingredient quality that you would be seeing in other comparably priced foods. With that in mind, is Royal Canin actually a good choice? That's going to really depend on where you're coming from. For certain conditions like kidney disease, there really aren't that many good options outside of these types of therapeutic diets that directly address the condition. That being said, for many other conditions, I found that Royal Canin foods seem to miss the mark in terms of addressing the particular issue. We saw that in the urinary food I looked at earlier. As for those diets that don't target a particular condition, it really depends on who you are. I ultimately don't think that the added price is justified given the ingredient quality that these foods appear to have. But at the same time, perhaps you trust Royal Canin. They do seem to have a very strong reputation for quality and consistency. And maybe your cats just like the foods. There are some reasons why you would spend a little bit extra to pay for Royal Canin, even though the ingredient quality doesn't appear to be on par with a lot of other similarly priced foods. So to help make everything a bit clearer, let's break everything down according to the All About Cats standard. So in terms of species appropriateness, we give Royal Canin a 6 out of 10. Their foods can be relatively species appropriate. They tend to emphasize animal ingredients, but they don't always. In terms of ingredient quality, I'm going to give them a 5 out of 10. We don't actually know all the details about the quality of ingredients that are being used. That being said, the fact that they're including ingredients like animal byproducts, corn gluten meal, and carrageenan does raise some red flags. In terms of product variety, I'm going to give Royal Canin an 8 out of 10. In terms of price, I'm going to give them a 6 out of 10. It's really mixed. And in terms of customer experience, I'll give them an 8 out of 10. A lot of people really like these foods. They've established a good reputation with customers. And a lot of people say that their therapeutic diets have helped their cats to feel better with the conditions they were intended for. And finally, I'm going to give them a 5 out of 10 for recall history. Although Royal Canin overall does seem to be doing really well in terms of not having their foods recalled, I can't really give them anything higher than a 5, considering that they've had 3 different recalls in the last 15 years. Overall, that adds up to a C+ grade. Alright, so that's about it for our review of Royal Canin cat food. I hope that you found it helpful and that it helped you feel a little bit better prepared when you're walking through the cat food aisle or talking to your veterinarian about trying a Royal Canin food. I know that especially when you're dealing with those therapeutic diets, it can be kind of difficult to know whether or not this is actually going to be a good choice, whether or not it's worth it, whether or not it can actually help your cat. It's always important to be informed before you make any sort of cat food decision, so don't be afraid to ask questions and think critically about the situation. And speaking of being informed, one of the best ways to keep your cat safe is to stay up to date on the latest recalls. Fortunately, we have a tool that makes this really easy. If you check out the description, you'll see a link to sign up to our free recall alert program, and this allows you to receive the news every time there's a new recall in the United States. It's a completely free and effortless way to stay informed and keep your cat safe. So again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope that it was helpful for you. If it was, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. It helps us a lot. And if you're interested, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more product reviews, buyer's guides, and information on all things cats. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.